my granddad was a reasonable referee. My dad was in the forces and he was a referee in the forces. And so I sort of was aware that it was a genuine option for something that you could do. I just remember being terrified, like genuinely terrified. Like, it's under 13s, but the coaches are like these guys' dads. So they're, 30, 40-year-old men. You're nervous. You're trying to remember all the things that you've learned. I remember being nervous sending him off. I was like, this guy's like probably 30 years old or something. I'm away to send him off. Like, this is quite intimidating. I made a few mistakes when I arrived in Jersey, which I can look back on now. And one was thinking that it was a step down in quality. Like, in hindsight, that was a mistake, because actually Jersey's such an interesting place for football, and I think somebody coming from the mainland anywhere, Scotland or England, might have this problem. It's the best refereeing community I've ever been part of. I genuinely mean that.
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Sportscast Jersey. Today we are joined by local referee Jamie Guyan. How are we doing, Jamie?
Yeah, I'm very good, mate. Thank you very much for having me on. Really appreciate it. A little bit nervous, but I'm sure it'll be fine.
Cheers. Nothing to be nervous about. First of all, as always, my first question to any of my guests: have you always been sporty since you were a kid growing up?
Yeah, definitely. I was thinking, you told me you were going to ask me this earlier, and I was thinking about it. Like, I have played, I think, every single sport at least once. I tried everything at school. I was part of a club for all the major, I played football, cricket, and cricket's not even a thing in Scotland, and I still played it. Rugby. At uni, I was in American football for a couple of seasons. I've taken up paddle in Jersey, tennis, the lot. So I'm not very good at any of them, which is why I keep looking for a new one. Eventually, try to find the one that I'm destined for. But yeah, I've always been keen to try all in any sports whenever I get an opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of football, when did that love first come about? Obviously, you're a football fan and you played and now a referee. So where did that all start for you?
Yeah, I literally can't remember a time when I didn't love football. Like, I can, some people can sort of pinpoint it to school or whatever. I think for me, it's literally been forever. There's a picture of me at 6 weeks old. I went to my first Aberdeen game. It was against Dundee at Pittodrie, and I'm in a Aberdeen baby grow in my dad's arms. So, like, it has been ingrained in me my entire life. I was born in England. I was born in London, and I lived in Portugal for a little bit as a kid as well. And my best friend at the time was called Chelsea. We were like 2 and 3, but so I was an Aberdeen fan because of my dad, and that was forced upon me. But then also I just became a Chelsea fan because I was born in London and my best friend was called Chelsea. And I was convinced Gianfranco Zola was my granddad because he looked like my granddad. So I was just like, and those are memories that, like, I can't remember anything from before that time. I just always loved football. As soon as I went to school, I was playing football and into football. As a England fan who starts school in Scotland, you get a pretty hard time pretty quickly for everything. So, like, I've got memories of all the sort of like major England incidents from the late 90s and early 2000s, because as soon as something bad happened to England, I was getting a hard time for it at school. Yeah. So always loved football, as long as I can remember.
Yeah, I guess a question that's not really asked that often to football fans, but why football? What makes football so good?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think about this a lot because I try and say this sometimes to non-football people and even to football people. Like, I like football beyond just, I'm in, like, I'll watch a game on a Saturday or something. Like, I absolutely love football. I've got my own podcast, as you know, which I do with a couple of mates. We chat about football every week. I'm speaking about football every day. I think you have to love football to be a referee, otherwise you'd be an idiot. So I absolutely love everything about it. And as much as I'm generally sporty and I follow and watch other sports, football's always the sort of core interest. It's hard to say, isn't it? I think it's incredibly easy to play, actually, compared to a lot of other sports. It's very accessible. You can, usually somebody's got a ball and you can make a game out of something, whether it's dribbling up and down the street, kicking it against the wall, playing with a plastic bottle, whatever it is, you can play football. Whereas, having a little kickabout of rugby or a kickabout of cricket or a kickabout of a lot of tennis or anything like that just isn't anywhere near as easy. And actually, a lot of these other sports are a lot harder. Like there's a lot more like sort of there's a lot more technical ability to just getting into it to the very, very beginning. Like tennis is a great example. Like tennis is really hard just to get a game of tennis. Whereas football, it almost doesn't matter how bad you are. If everybody's as bad as each other, you'll have some sort of game of kicking it around. So there's probably that element to it. The excitement of it. I was a season ticket holder at Pittodrie for sort of 15 years, and that feeling of going to the game and being with everyone as you're going in, that community, the nothing compares to the feeling of a goal, or nothing makes you as angry as a controversial decision in the moment. Like the emotions are 11 out of 10 sort of all the time. And I'm not the first person to say it, but if you could bottle the feeling of a goal and sell it, you'd be a millionaire. So I think those are probably all the reasons. And it's family as well, isn't it? Like my dad's a massive football fan. My granddad's a massive football fan. They are both still going to Pittodrie every, second week. So, and if your friends around you are all football fans as well, then it kind of just becomes ingrained in you. You can't really put your finger on what it is about it that you love so much.
No, I think you explained it really well there, and I would have found it hard to kind of explain it because, as everyone knows, football's probably not my number one, even though I shouldn't say that, but it is, and yeah, it's hard to explain, but it's an addiction, and you get into it. It's a healthy addiction as well. As you were saying, though, you went to games weekly. You probably heard a lot of verbal abuse and what have you at referees. So what made you actually want to be one?
Yeah, brilliant question. I ask myself this every Saturday, usually at about 4:15 when I've left the game. Is it why do I do this? Yeah, and I've been in grounds with my dad going absolutely ballistic at referees and like making sure I'm front and center at the wall to boo them off the pitch. And most people listening to this will not be familiar with Jim Traynor, but Jim Traynor was a Radio Scotland presenter who used to do the phone in on a Saturday evening. And we lived like 2.5 hours away from Aberdeen. So every time driving back in the car, me and my dad would be spitting about something the referee had done. And I'd be on the phone trying to get onto Jim Traynor to moan about the referee that week in the car back. So, it's funny when you ask why. The reason most referees give, and there is an element of truth in this as always, is I wasn't very good at football. And there's not really two ways about that. Like, I loved it. I played it all the time. I still play now. Still play small, like 5-a-side, 6-a-side leagues. I'll play an 11-a-side game if, they tend not to come up casually. But if one does, I'll play. But I sort of knew that I was good enough to maybe play grassroots football, but I was never going to be good enough to do anything exciting. My granddad was a reasonable referee. My dad was in the forces and he was a referee in the forces. And so I sort of was aware that it was a genuine option for something that you could do. And at 16, my dad signed me up for the course, was like, go along, give it a go, see what you think. In Scotland, that's the youngest you can do it. And I just thought, even at that age, I thought there might be opportunities here that I would never get as a player in football. And I love football. So I wanted to put myself in the best position to get opportunities to do cool things. When I first qualified, the guy that used to give me a lift to training, so like as a referee in Scotland, the local association arranges a training session twice a week. And it's kind of running around a chat, keeping your fitness up, that kind of thing. And the guy that used to give me a lift was an assistant referee in the Premier League in Scotland. And there was one week he couldn't give me a lift because he was doing a Champions League game at the Bernabeu. And I was just like, that is mental. I was 16. Yeah, exactly. Brilliant excuse. I'm 16 years old. And the guy that, it's just Willie that I get in the car with and go to training every week. And he's going to the Bernabeu. And I'm like, That's mind blowing. You know, I get back from training, I put on the Real Madrid game, and there's Willie like dancing up and down the line. Just, you know, he's from the same town I was from, and so I kind of got into it thinking that that was a possibility, and then immediately there was people in front of me who were sort of like, "Oh my god, this is actually real! Like I could genuinely go and do really phenomenal things in football that I certainly was never going to play at the Bernabeu as a player, not unless I paid a lot of money for a charity game, that's for sure."
Yeah, exactly. And you talked about the course and going on it when you're 16. At first, were you happy and excited to go on? And how was that course back then?
Yeah, it's interesting you asked that because I genuinely can't remember. I can't for the life of me remember what I was thinking before I went on it. I remember it was really quite far away, you know, like 25 minutes in the car or something. It was in October, so it was pitch black when I was going. I remember being in a room full of like middle-aged men, some of them quite argumentative with really stupid opinions about football, whether it was the rules or just generally like football, and kind of sat there by far the youngest in the room, far too scared to sort of give an opinion unless I was directly asked. And I think because I was at school at the time, it was almost like just another class. You know, it was 10 weeks, the course. It was like once a week for 10 weeks, 2 hours in a classroom. And you basically did like one or two of the laws every week, and you'd go through them and you'd watch some videos and have a chat. And the guy that ran the course was a chap called David McGeeky, who is now done Champions League games himself. He's done countless Scottish Cup finals and Old Firm derbies and that kind of thing. And he would just kind of take you through the stuff. I remember every week getting in the car to go home with my dad and having learned something new about football. Like, you know, did you know if there's a free kick inside the 6-yard box, you have to take it from the edge of the 6-yard box. You don't take it from exactly where it was, something like that. And my dad would be like, wow, I didn't know that. Or I'd be like, you know, did you know the weight of the ball has to be X and the PSI should be Y? And just kind of finding these things fascinating, you know, learning the offside rule as it was in 2009, certainly not that anymore. And just finding it really cool. Sort of like being the guy that was going back to school that knew more about the rules than anyone else was. So like in some ways I was getting a really hard time at school because it was like, why the fuck do you want to be a referee? That's ridiculous. And at the same time, they would all be like, oh, what's the rule for this? And what did you make of that decision? So they are sort of my main memories of doing the course, which was a long time ago now.
Yeah. No, it's good because you do learn a lot that an average fan doesn't know. And that's interesting. And do you remember, obviously, your first game, you would have been thrown into juniors or, well, not adults straight away, into junior matches and then into adults. Do you remember your first game in a junior with a junior team?
Yeah, I do. So I remember my first game. It was an under-13s game, 11 aside, and it was actually at the public park that was just down the road from the house that I'd grown up in, which is actually now a housing estate. I went back to it a few years ago. It's not even a football pitch anymore, which is quite sad. But yeah, remember doing my first game there. A more senior referee would come and sort of help you out. Make sure you were sort of getting yourself ready. I just remember being terrified, like genuinely terrified. Like it's under 13s, but the coaches are like these guys' dads. So they're, you know, 30, 40-year-old men. You're nervous. You're trying to remember all the things that you've learned. Like really simple things. Like I would, when there was a goal, I would blow the whistle, which you don't really do. But then when it was kickoff, I wouldn't blow the whistle. I would just point. I remember like really silly things like that. And yeah, it was terrifying. I remember rightly, I think it went all right. My feedback was I didn't run around enough. I do remember that. I remember him saying, you look like quite a fit young lad and you did a lot of walking. You definitely need to do some more running. But I think that was just nerves. Like I didn't want to run around like a headless chicken. So yeah, and I did. Because I was only 16, you did really start with the youngest guys, whereas maybe some of the older refs would go straight into adult football or whatever. So yeah, I started with that, did a whole season of under 13s. And I remember the step up to under 14s the next year and thinking, whoa, it's a big step up in quality of football, this. Even though it was actually, because I'd got a year older, the lads had all got a year older. So it was actually refereeing the same teams and the same boys, but just thinking like, oh, under 14s now, like this is serious stuff. Like this is really
Yeah,
taking it up a notch. Yeah. Yeah, it is kind of funny looking back at that and how important I thought it was when I was sort of 16, 17.
yeah. And then fast forward into adult football. Obviously, doing it in Scotland, a lot. I'd guess a lot different to football here. So how was your first game in senior football?
Yeah, it was interesting because the promotion to senior football coincided with moving away for university. So I kept doing kids football where I grew up, and I moved to uni when I was 18, joined the new association, and they were like, "Man, yeah, just get you straight into adult football. You know, there's no need for it." So I was delighted. I was like, "Fantastic!" I've sort of jumped everything from under 16s to adults. This is great, and I went to uni in Aberdeen, so it was a big city, much bigger than where I'd grown up. And I went straight into what's called amateur football in Scotland. So it's your real grassroots. There's sort of four divisions. So you got everything from Division 4 to the Premier of amateur football. Probably quite similar to the setup in Jersey, I guess, in terms of the structure. There's no pyramid above that, so the guys winning the amateur Prem aren't going anywhere. That's kind of where it's at. Public parks, B teams, etc., etc. I went to my first game. I won't say the teams because they probably still exist, but one of them was the name of quite a infamous neighborhood in Aberdeen. So straight away, people were saying to me like, "Oh, that team's a nightmare. Like, be on your toes, etc."
Yeah.
Like, brilliant. First adult game. I'm 18 years old. I'm quite clearly a kid. I looked young for 18. I'm not the biggest guy generally, and so I go to this game, and it was in like a sort of like a Kennedy type idea. It was in a massive pavilion. There's like 14 games going on. I just happen to be one of them. So I'm like looking at the board, trying to work out where my teams are, where I'm meant to be getting changed. There's like 60-year-old referees coming and going. There's 35 players outside having a fag before the game. Like the whole thing was just like wildly intimidating as an 18-year-old. And I'm trying to go through the motions as if it's like really serious, do everything properly, get my team lines, write them all down, check the colors and stuff. The whole time people are looking at you like an alien. And then I went out, did the game. The game was okay, quite aggressive. And I remember just thinking like, this is fine, this is fine. And then bam, there was like a big moment and it all just started kicking off. And I was like, oh shit, like what the fuck am I meant to be doing? So I had a sending off. And I remember being nervous sending him off. I was like, this guy's like probably 30 years old or something. I'm away to send him off. Like, this is quite intimidating. And I remember sending him off and him being annoyed and that all just creating a commotion. He goes off, game carries on. And then at full time, sort of shaking hands, and everybody was being quite cordial, like, well done, ref. Yeah, that was a bit tough, like tough situation. You dealt with that well. And then I turn around and the guy I'd sent off is marching onto the pitch with his dog on a chain, with his shirt off, like, I'm going to have you. And it was the captain of the other team, this guy, like, I sort of in my head remember him being about 7'8". In reality, he was probably only a couple inches bigger than me, but I remember him being this like man mountain that like sort of stepped in between us and was like, no, just get back to the change room. Don't be stupid. He's just a kid, etc. And I stayed dead still. And I remember a guy walking past me like, oh, you don't look phased, mate. You must get this all the time. And I'm walking in. And I wasn't phased. I was incredibly phased. I was like literally frozen to the spot. I was like, what the fuck is going on? This is terrifying. So yeah, that was quite an acid test into adult football. Like that was pretty scary. And then like my whole sort of first season of adult football was all just like dealing with those kind of teams. Some weeks everybody would be lovely. Other weeks it'd be really difficult. Going to pitches that I didn't drive at the time, so I was having. Sometimes you get in the bus, an hour and a half on the bus, 2-3 buses through town to get to these games. You're completely on your own because, unlike Jersey, very much at that level in Scotland, because there's so many levels above, you never have assistants, never, ever, like except for a cup final maybe. So you're going to every single game on your own, and usually it was fine, but every now and again it like you are a bit like, Christ, I'm in a suburb I've never heard of. Like I'm relying on getting this bus home. I've got no idea who these people are. Nobody here likes me. Nobody really wants me to be here. And just kind of hoping it goes all right. Like I've got memories of coming out of the ground and the bus stop would be like just outside the car park and thinking, you know what, I'm going to walk for 2 or 3 bus stops and get the bus you know, 2, 3, 400 meters away from the ground, because the last thing I want is boys coming out driving past and giving me a hard time. So yeah, that sort of first season was quite tough, and I was young. Like being an 18-year-old doing adult football was on your own was interesting.
Yeah, definitely. And then obviously it came to Jersey a few seasons back now for your first season. And how is that transition in terms of football? Kind of, you're talking about stories there, and then you come to Jersey. It just, I don't know what it's like for referees, but for someone that's watching on, I'd like to think it's a lot more respectful. Is it?
Yeah, well, I need to be careful what I say, because people that I referee now might actually listen to this. No, interesting you say that, because so I'd refereed adult football in Scotland for 10 years before I came here, which might surprise some people based on what they see on a Saturday, but I did. So, you know, I'd done 10 years of adult football, which is a long time. And in that time, I'd progressed to a reasonable level in Scotland. I was in Scotland, you have the senior list and the junior list. The senior list is sort of like the top half of referees and then the junior list is the other. And I had just stepped into the senior list. Now, the senior list is by no means sort of Premier League and stuff. It's huge. So I was refereeing what's called junior football, which is adults, confusingly. So you get the sort of top 4 divisions, then you get the Highland and Lowland League, and then below that you get juniors. And traditionally they weren't part of the pyramid, but they are now. And so they were traditionally the best sort of semi-pro teams. That was kind of where they sat. Some of them had money, some of them didn't. They all had their own grounds. They would all have their own clubhouse and pub and stuff. So it was like proper football, like, you know, real clubs with histories and boards and all that kind of thing. I wasn't at the public parks anymore with like 10 games going on around me. So, you know, that was really good. It gave opportunities to travel, gave opportunities to do, I got to referee at Pittodrie, which is probably the favourite thing I've ever done. Ran the line for Aberdeen under-21s against Hamilton under-21s in the Scottish Cup, which was really cool. Ryan Fraser played in that game, you know, now of Newcastle still, I think. But anyway, of Premier League quality, you know, I'd done Aberdeen games when Scott McKenna was coming through, now at Forest. I did games when Calvin Ramsey was coming through, you know, now at Liverpool, hasn't quite broken in yet, but, you know, so like really, really cool stuff. So that was over quite a long time. So I think move to Jersey was interesting for loads of reasons. From a footballing sense, it was in the broader side of things, like a slight step down in quality in terms of the level I had been at before. But I think I made a few mistakes when I arrived in Jersey, which I can look back on now. And one was thinking that it was a step down in quality. Like in hindsight, that was a mistake, because actually Jersey's such an interesting place for football. And I think somebody coming from the mainland anywhere, Scotland or England, might have this problem. There are guys that are playing in Jersey that are far too good to be playing at the level they play at. Far too good. But they live in Jersey. This is where they're from, or this is where they work, or whatever it might be. And they play for the team that they play for. But in reality, if they were in England or Scotland, they would be playing a number of divisions above sort of grassroots football. Equally, there's guys that aren't good enough to play for the team they play for. You know, there isn't a huge pool of players here, so the quality discrepancy is massive, which is unusual, I think, probably anywhere in the mainland, because I think anywhere in the mainland, there's so many teams and so many levels, it all kind of evens itself out. So that was quite interesting. You're absolutely right. Way more respectful. The sort of dissent in Jersey is totally different. It's more like whinging and moaning than it is like actual abuse. I've certainly never been called any of the things, certainly not to my face. I don't know what people say in the dressing room. I've never been called the things to my face that I would be called in Scotland. And that's just cultural, isn't it? You know, the language is different. But no, the transition was interesting. I Now, having been here and settled a bit longer, I absolutely love Jersey football. I think it's brilliant. I think there's so much about Jersey football to be celebrated. The fact that the clubs all have an identity, the fact they have most of them have their own pitches and pavilions and all that sort of stuff at grassroots level is awesome. The quality of some of the players is tremendous for the level. The quality of the coaching is way higher than it would be at this level in other places, which are all really good. Another thing that I learned quickly in Jersey, which I didn't know coming, is everybody knows each other, and that is something that if a new referee came to Jersey and asked me for one piece of advice, I'd be like, do not underestimate how much all these teams know each other. And sometimes that would even be from like a management perspective. I made mistakes when I first arrived where people would be sort of kicking off with each other. And I think they're a way to kick off. And I would get involved like far too heavy-handedly. And it turned out they'd be like best mates, or they would be like mates of mates, and they would all be in the same friendship group. And then they would all turn on me. And I'd be like, wait a minute, you guys were about to, I thought you guys were about to kick off. Why is everybody now picking on me? I was trying to split the whole thing up. Whereas you can definitely take a step back and sort of let Jersey kind of manage itself a bit better because of the way the players know each other and stuff, which is really interesting. And yeah, it's a great place to referee and be involved in football. And if I knew what I knew now when I first arrived, I'd probably have made it a much smoother transition. Like I say, I definitely made mistakes. Dealt with dissent far too firmly because I was used to what I was used to at home. And it just wasn't necessary. Didn't realise the teams were all mates. Learned that the hard way, that actually they all like each other a lot more than they like you. And also, like, I found it really strange how often I seen players. So like when I left Scotland, I was refereeing teams that were like a 2-hour drive away. So I'm never going to see those guys. Like they live miles and miles and miles away. I'm never going to see those guys in real life. I remember like my first weekend in Jersey, I walked into a pub and there was half the team I'd just refereed in my first game. I was like, oh my God, this is weird. But then that's happening every weekend. And equally, because of that and everybody knows each other, you need to learn not to talk about refereeing in pubs or talk about the game or whatever it is as well, which is another bit of advice I'd definitely give somebody arriving to the island. But in the large, all very positive. And actually, the negatives are all sort of self-reflective and criticisms of me on arriving rather than issues with Jersey football.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting to hear someone who's come in from not Jersey to hear what their thoughts are on the league and the standard and, like you say, the descent and everything like that. So it's interesting to hear that. And what I want to ask as well is, obviously the referees are tight here. They all know each other. There's a committee. I'm sure you have socials as well. How good has that been?
Amazing. It's the best refereeing community I've ever been part of. I genuinely mean that. I'm not just saying that because they'll all give me abuse if they listen and I don't say that. But genuinely, like, when I was a referee in Aberdeen, there were some great guys there, but we had 250 registered referees. Maybe had 80 that came to meetings, and we maybe had 25 that came to training. That's an odd community. It's very big. I'd go to games, I'd get 2 assistants I'd never met before. I'd never meet again. Sometimes they'd be nice, sometimes they wouldn't be nice. I remember an assistant going absolutely mental at me at half-time for a decision I made and thinking, we're on the same side. Christ, I get enough of that out there, never mind from you. Jersey is totally different. Everybody, and I think it's also because we all referee at the same level. In the mainland, people are like moving, they're trying to go higher. It's a bit more competition, which sometimes can breed bad habits. In Jersey, everybody is super supportive. Like, we want more referees because if there's more referees, we get more assistants. We always run the line for each other. So at home, I would run the line for the guys above me, and the guys below me would run the line for me. And it was hierarchical. Whereas now it's like, I'll run the line for Luke, for example, one week, and he'll run the line for me next week. So there's no hierarchy. There's less competition. Super supportive network. So, I had some meetings with guys shortly after first arriving saying, it sounds like you're having some tough games. What's going on? How can we help? Here are some things about Jersey you maybe don't know. Here are some tips about Jersey football that might help you get on in your games that, look, they might not be textbook, might not be what you would do at home. It might not be what FIFA would tell you to do if they came to watch your game. But these are really helpful tips, which were super useful. The socials are great, which wasn't really something I would have done at home. And it just kind of like being a referee is often quite lonely. And in Jersey, it's the first time I felt like I'm part of a refereeing team, which has been massive. And I'm super grateful for that. So like some really, really great guys with some genuinely good advice. And as I said, in the way that some of the players here and the coaches are too good for the level, technically speaking, in the grand scheme of things, so are some of the referees. Some of the referees in Jersey are tremendous. And like Jersey is genuinely so lucky to have some of the guys that they've got doing this level of football. And if they were in the UK, then they would be jumping up levels so quickly because they're a really, really high standard. And so that's good to learn from as well. You can run the line for these guys and learn from them. So no, I think because of the tight-knit community that there is here and how sensible the referees are and stuff, I think the community is awesome. And hopefully that leads to some more youngsters coming through as well.
Yeah. It's kind of my last point today, but that's where I wanted to go finally and kind of promote refereeing a little bit. And why should people start to referee?
I think in Jersey, it's slightly easier to answer because there are genuine opportunities in Jersey to play and referee. So becoming a referee in Jersey does not mean you need to give up playing. And there are plenty of examples in our ranks at the moment that guys that are playing reserve league football and refereeing C teams the following weekend when they don't have a game. So you've got a genuine opportunity to give it a go and not really have to fully commit to it and give up your playing career. It's great just to know the rules. I generally think people underestimate that. Just learn the rules because trust me, it makes you much less angry on a Saturday if you can apply a bit of logic to what's going on. And you might not agree with every decision. Christ, I disagree with top level referees all the time, but at least I sort of understand the rules that they're trying to apply and can sort of associate the logic that they're thinking through. So that's good as well. Knowledge is power and insert other cliches, but that's another reason. Good for fitness, generally speaking, particularly at this level. You probably run around a bit more as a referee than you do as a player, depending which position you play in. And the last one is, if you're being really honest with yourself, if you want opportunities in football, how good are you at playing? And will playing give you the opportunities that you would love to have? Because refereeing is a slightly easier corridor to doing that, particularly if you're young and fit and enthusiastic. That like sort of gets you a fair leg up immediately. And if you get in it young as well, you can get there quicker. The Premier League and whatnot are desperate for young, fit referees to be coming through the ranks. So if you give it a go, you never know where you might end up. When I was sitting watching Aberdeen at Pittodrie as a 15-year-old, I didn't think I'd ever run the line there. And granted, it wasn't for the full team, but I got to run the line. I've run the line on a friendly for Arbroath, who are a championship team, top half of the championship in Scotland, vying for promotion. I've refereed guys that are full internationals coming through the youth ranks and got to see them develop. So yeah, even just in Jersey, you get to do Bulls games. Some of the Bulls games are brilliant. I got to run the line Stenhousemuir against the Bulls in the summer. It was so much fun, so much fun. Really getting to see the quality of Stenhousemuir. The fact that the Bulls were able to compete in that game was really interesting. I did Bulls against Kettering Town last year. Yeah. That was fantastic. These are teams that could have an FA Cup game at Old Trafford. You're and you find yourself one step removed from that kind of level. So that I think that's the big thing I would say to people. And also, if the more people that do it, the better referees will get. I think we've had this conversation. I think the biggest problem with the quality of top flight refereeing is the talent pool. Lots of people want to be football players, millions of people, and that's why you get the very, very best at the top. Far fewer people want to be referees. And if more of us were doing it at a grassroots level, then the people that get to the top would just naturally be of a better quality. They would be fitter, they'd be sharper, they'd be better at man management, they'd be more knowledgeable. So if you're a frustrated 14 to 25-year-old watching football every weekend, give it a go, because it genuinely sounds like a World War II recruitment advert, but it could be you. If you did it, and if you finish playing as well, do it. It's a good way to stay in the game. You can referee a lot later than you can play, and amount of players that say, have you ever played the game? You'd be a better referee if you'd played the game. Well, there's guys out there 35, 36, 40 with 15, 20 seasons under their belt. Go and become a referee and pass that experience on, and you'll be a good referee anyway. And you've got 20 years of footballing experience to pass on to youngsters around you who are trying to become referees. So yeah, loads of reasons. If anybody genuinely did have any questions and wanted to ask as well, my inbox is always open. So please feel free to ask, and I'll give you an honest answer. It's not all roses.
Yeah, brilliant. That's all for today, I think, Jamie. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for your time, and really good insight into what it's like in the kind of world of a referee in local football.
No, I appreciate it, Dan. Thank you very much for having me on. Hopefully I didn't waffle too much, but it was brilliant. And I can't wait for you to return the favour and we can talk about Man United and VAR and all the super controversial things in the future.
Yeah, definitely. I can't wait about that. Can't wait. I will do it. Right. That brings us to an end of another brilliant episode of Sportscast Jersey. Thank you for watching or listening. Another episode is coming soon.